Just waiting to accept the request to join the live. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited. I
Of
love Zora. I
oh,
love Zora.
oh, the love
So
is
much.
mutual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Well, as folks are coming on into the live, I'll just quickly introduce myself and talk a little bit about what the Zora Canon Book Club is. My name is Jenna, and I am the audience engagement editor for Zora, and we are hosting an IG Live discussion for the Zora Canon Book Club, which we host every month. So we launched a book club at the beginning of the year based off of our literary canon, which published the 100 greatest books by Black women, African American women. And so we are hosting a book club. Every month we choose a book from that list and we read it as a community, and we host it exclusively on Instagram. And last month, July, we read Assata. And so we
Nice.
are excited to jump on in and talk about it. Before we dive in, also, I get so many questions about how to join the book club, and I just want to clarify very, very quickly. Just by following Zora, you are part of the book club. We host it exclusively on Instagram every month. All the discussions, quotes, pictures, everything is solely on our Instagram page. So just by following us, you join it. But yes, let's jump on in. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the Free Black Women's Library?
Well, thanks again for having me on. My name is Ola, and I'm from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And the name of my project, the Free Black Women's Library, this is a project I started about 5 years ago. And it's a social art project that right now contains about 2,500 books written by Black women.
Oh.
And it's a mobile library that travels all over New York City and sometimes outside of New York City. Every month it's in a different location, and whenever the library appears anywhere in a free public space, we talk about a specific book, we talk about an author, we talk about a genre, we talk about an issue, an artist, pretty much anything that is on our minds. And sometimes we might talk about things that are really super serious, like sexual violence or sexual harassment. And sometimes we might talk about Black Panther, the film, or Beyonce's Lemonade. We probably would have talked about Black is King if we weren't in Corona. So each month it's different, you know, and the idea around it is that Black womanhood is expansive, and there's not just one thing that defines who we are. There's not just one thing that represents us. So we'll never run out of things to discuss and dissect, and we have fun, we get nerdy. It's really, really cute.
I love it.
And, you know, another thing that the library does is that it provides books for the community. So for every book you bring, you get to take a book. As long as it's written by a Black woman writer, you're able to trade. So I have books of every genre. I also have comic books and graphic novels, books on beauty, zines, vintage magazines that people can look at. And, you know, just like a library, there are books that you might have never seen before. And then there are books where you're like, oh, I read this when I was in high school. You know, so it's a wide range. It's children's, it's young adult. And, you know, since the Corona has started, we have been meeting virtually over Zoom and trying to create that same community in the virtual space. And it's definitely not the same, but it'll do for now.
Yeah.
Because it's really, you know, it's about the books and it's about Black womanhood, but it's also about giving us creating a space where we can like get together and be with each other in a really, you know, beautiful, tender, loving, nurturing way.
Right. So where can folks find more information about how to join some of those live discussions?
Oh, well, you can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook. You can email the Free Black Women's Library at gmail.com to get a newsletter. I also have a Patreon that people can become a member of the Patreon if they want to support. I'm raising money for a vehicle to get the library around because it's really, really taxing to take an Uber or take a Lyft with like 10 boxes of books to
I
these
can
different
only imagine.
places. So, so I'm raising money for that. And send me a DM or email, anything like that. I'm having an actual event for the first time since March. I'm having a pop-up this month on August 23rd in Von King Park. And I have like strict COVID guidelines in place, but people are welcome to come and look at the collection and trade books and talk about Black August. So
Wonderful.
if you're in Brooklyn, come to Von
Yes.
King Park on Sunday, August 23rd. Make sure
And
you wear a
follow the Free
mask.
Black Women's Library.
Yes.
On Instagram.
Make sure you wear a mask, keep your hands clean, and you can get to touch and feel and
engage with it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. Here at Zora, we have such a deep appreciation for books and for authors, particularly for Black women authors. And so that definitely resonates with our folks. So definitely check that out at the Free Black Women's Library.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So let's dive in and let's talk about Assata. And there's right. I was like, I don't even know where to start because there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about.
That's how I say her name. I love it.
As it should be. As that is exactly how we should all be saying her name, because this book is so transformative and illuminating, and it speaks to so many different people at different junctures and different places. Like, it meets people where they're at, which is something that I love about it. It's very warm and endearing, but it also is teaching you hard lessons. Yeah. So, I mean, I want to start off by just casually talking about the first time that you read this book. And Zora fan, please feel free to comment as well. Talk about the first time you read this book, because I think, like, for so many of us, I know for me, I was highlighting and writing in the margins and just feeling like this was a history textbook that I should have had in AP US history in high school that I never had access to, or that no one 100%. Ever gave to me.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. 100%.
So,
exactly. Well, I've always loved reading and always loved books, but it wasn't until I was like an adult that I understood like the depth and beauty of Black women's writing. And I was also part of a community organization where we did a lot of political education. I still am part of the MXGM, Malcolm X Grassroots Network, right? So we read a lot of books. We read like They Came Before Columbus, the Autobiography of Malcolm X, et cetera, et cetera. And somehow within those sessions, within those workshops and readings, somebody either gave me or told me about Assata Shakur's book. And I read it, and it was like my whole mind just went, because until then, I had been reading a lot of really hardcore, deep Black cultural texts, Black political texts, Black historical texts, but I had never read anything by a Black woman, and also not anything that by a Black woman that didn't feel super academic and super lofty. I had never read anything where I could actually relate to the person speaking. Like, there were so many moments in this book where I got chills because I was like, I feel like this is me. Like, I feel I can relate so deeply to this woman's story. Not so much being abused by the police, but the fact that she started from her childhood and the things that she went through during her teenage years, running away constantly, being objectified by grown-ass men, dealing with microaggressions at work, understanding that the things that she had been taught, or, the ideas that had been kind of been perforating in her mind and in her community needed to be dissected and criticized and analyzed. Being sexually harassed at work, like, all these different things. I was like, these are like rite of passage things for Black women in this country, or what? Right. So it blew my mind and it inspired me. And also the fact that she's a poet. Like, I called myself a poet at the time. This was a long time ago.
Okay.
I'm not a poet no more. But at the time, I thought I was like a poet. So the fact that she was like expressing her ideas through poetry, the beauty and the pain and the love that she felt in the world, the fact that she really loved nature, she loved trees and flowers, riding her bike, like all these little tiny details just
Yeah.
really like shook something in me, like, oh snap, like I could be a revolutionary. You know, I was really
Right.
young at the time and very idealist, you know, and even rereading it now, years later, I still feel really attached to the text, and I still feel really deeply inspired by the text. But I think the difference between then and now is that I'm definitely coming to it from a more more political space,
Right.
you know, and thinking like, what are the lessons that I can learn here when it comes to how I can be a better member of my community, and what are the things that I can look to that she did, that I can, you know, kind of use as a foundation for my own work. So
Yeah. Absolutely. That definitely resonates because her story is so relatable because you can see yourself in every step of her journey. It wasn't like she was coming at us with like, I was born a Black revolutionary, you should have already known this information. She
exactly,
had a journey and she had
exactly,
to come into this
exactly.
information in the same way that so many of us do, that we all do. And so it was just such a down to earth and grounding experience
Right.
of reading it and and seeing her evolution and being able to relate to it in that sense.
Exactly, exactly. And I really appreciate that honesty and that accountability. Someone said this, I get this, I'm not good at going live because I'm distracted by the comments,
It's okay.
but you know, I really love her transparency and her honesty. Like when she talks about how she like really loved Elvis Presley, and then
Hmm.
she found out he was a racist, and she just like took her poster down and like
Right.
put it away.
Right.
You know, I'm like, we've all
Right.
had that moment where we
We
found
do.
out that we like were into something that was not for us, and it was just kind of like, oh, okay, good to know. Time
Yeah.
to time to like wake up to the understanding that as a Black woman, at the time, like cash poor, like there are certain things that aren't made to like nurture who I am as a person,
Right.
and that's a really good awareness to have. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel like we all have a problematic fave who we just, you quietly just, okay, that's all right, good to know. You
Yeah.
learn it. She definitely, when she was in college, she talks about how sometimes she would just stay quiet and she would listen to those
Yes.
who knew more, and she would ask questions, not being afraid to ask these questions and start referring to texts or referring to people who know more than you. It's all a part of that process. And I really appreciate her distilling all of that information.
Yes. Yes. I actually have a little piece that I wanted to read
Yes, please do.
because there's a little piece of this quote that appears online a lot, and it's a really good little piece, but the fullness of it, I just wanted to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's when she learns about, when she's having this conversation with these folks and they're talking about the Vietnam War and communism, and she's like, yeah, it's good that they're fighting communism, and the people around her are like, are you sure about
Right.
that? You know, and she keeps going, and then she realizes that maybe what she's saying is not. So she says, only a fool lets somebody else tell him who his enemy is. I
Mm-hmm.
started remembering all the stupid stuff people told me when I was little. Don't trust West Indians. They will stab you in the back. Don't trust Africans because they think they're better than we are. Don't hang out with Puerto Ricans. They all stick together or they will gang up on you. I had learned through experience that they were all lies told by stupid people. But I never thought it could be so easily tricked. But I never thought I could be so easily tricked by something I didn't understand. It's got to be one of the most basic principles of living.
Mm-hmm.
Always decide who your enemy is for yourself, and never let your enemies choose your enemies for you. So, and after that, she started studying politics. She started studying different systems of government. And I feel like I see people post a lot, never let your enemies choose your enemies for you, Assata,
Right.
which is such a good quote. Like, it's deep within itself. But the fact that she considers it to be a basic principle of living is, I feel like there's something to be said for that, because when we talk about like what's basic, that's like the that's like the bottom, like the least you can do is not let people decide who you're gonna hate on and who your enemy is, right?
Right.
And then there's this whole situation about internalized anti-Blackness and like, you know, these diasporic like wars that are sometimes happening within the Black community between like people from the Caribbean or Puerto Ricans or this and that. And it's kind of just like, wait a minute, like just take a second and sit back, you know. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this book, but I feel like one of them is this one, and the idea of like trusting community and like trusting in the fact that like community actually exists, like it's a real thing, and to lean into that and help to create it. So I just had to share that because I just love that part, and I see that quote so much online, and I just hope that people read the whole passage and take in the whole passage.
Absolutely. There are a bunch of quotes like that in this book where I remember, you know, you see them floating around. You see them on, you know, really nice quote cards, or you see them just kind of people tweeting them. And it's like, you know, perfectly 280 characters, but there's so much depth to them. So thank
like
you.
The Assata chant that we, you know,
absolutely. I remember reading that for the first time, like, oh my, like there's so much more here. Like there's people left out. I mean, in the context of how she or where she was writing, it also plays into just how much more powerful the work is and the words are.
Right. Because she's saying we have nothing to lose but our chains, and she's locked up. She's literally incarcerated.
Literally.
Right? So it's like, and she talks in the book about this idea of like freedom and like being free, being liberated, and how it starts from within.
Right.
You know, it starts from self-reflection and self-determination. Someone said, what's the book? Assata.
Yeah.
Assata, an autobiography by Assata, published in 1988.
Yes.
Please read it. And then read it some more. You know, and the poetry, right? The poetry is so beautiful.
Absolutely. Do you have a poem that you love? Like something I know from your poetry days, maybe one that you refer to constantly?
One that I wrote?
Yeah. No, one that you love that she wrote.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I won't put you on the spot like that.
It's hard to choose. It's really hard for me to choose. I think, I love the one where she says, I believe in living. I believe in the spectrum of better days and gamma people. I believe in sunshine, in windmills and waterfalls, tricycles and rocking chairs. And I believe that seeds grow into sprouts and sprouts grow into trees. I believe in the magic of hands and in the wisdom of the eyes. I believe in rain and tears and in the blood of infinity. I believe in life, and I have seen the death parade march through the torso of the earth, sculpting mud bodies in its path. I have seen the destruction of the daylight and seen bloodthirsty maggots prayed to and saluted. I've seen the kind become the blind and the blind become the bind in one easy lesson. I have walked on cut glass. I have eaten crow and blender bread and breathed the stench of indifference. I've been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy, and if I know anything at all, it's that a wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. I believe in living. I believe in birth. I believe in the sweat of love and in the fire of truth. And I believe that a lost ship steered by tired, seasick sailors can still be guided home to port. I love that so much.
Love it. And folks are commenting that they love that the book starts with that poem. How perfect of an intro that is.
Yeah.
Lovely,
And this feels like, this moment right here I'm having with you really feels like fate. I'm super corny, so please forgive me, but
bring it on.
I posted this poem on my Facebook on this day last year.
Oh, wow.
So I was just like flipping through the memories, and this came up, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm meant to read this poem out loud today.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I read it is because
I love that.
because I was in some type of mood to post this entire thing on
Right.
Facebook. You know, and I love that she starts out with that poem too, because I feel like it sets the mood for the story, because you have this poem, and then you have the first chapter where it's like state violence, like automatically, you know, maybe somebody might say trigger warning. I don't know. But it's like she's telling you, it's like she's preparing you, like, don't, like, this story is a rough one. This story is intense. This story is filled with painful moments, okay? But there's a liberation and a freedom and a strength that runs all the way through it, you know, and just come along for this ride with me.
Yes.
It's gonna be a ride.
It is. Yeah.
Keep breathing and keep believing. Right.
Right. I love that. Because it is. I mean, it opens up pretty violently, like, and it's hard to kind of get through it and then get to all of what she's teaching. But it's like, she definitely sets that tone and sets the context that she's writing this book in. And just, it feels like it comes from such a place of love. It's like, just, I love Black people. I love you. And I want you to have this information. I want this to be a resource. So I love that.
Yes.
And as we're talking about kind of her work as well, I mean, she talks a lot. She references the Black Liberation Army throughout, and then, you know, kind of gets more into it. But something that stood out to me and you know, some of the first times that she would mention Black Liberation Army is that the organization wasn't like, here's your membership card, here's you show up at this place and time, you know, it's not a physical thing necessarily, but that if you are seeking freedom for Black people, you are part of the Black Liberation Army kind of vibe. Like, it is a state of mind. And I think it's so interesting because we started reading this book at the beginning of July, end of June, beginning of July, during a time where this country was going through this reckoning in terms of understanding institutionalized racism and systemic oppression, or having this national conversation about it rather than understanding it. Right. And so we decided there at the time, a lot of people were looking for resources and looking for what do I read? How do I learn more? You know, I want to steep myself in some of this work. And this work this book was written, 30 years ago, like more than 30 years ago. Yeah. So the information is here. Like, we've always, we've had this information for so long. And so my question to you is, like, kind of, what do you think and we can learn from that, like, from an organizing perspective, as we're kind of going through this moment right now where people are really energized around what do we do, kind of how can we take this idea that, Black liberation is a state of mind, and put that into action?
Ooh, that's a lot. Well, reading definitely helps. I think part of community organizing work, part of doing work, if insisting around, like, teaching yourself about anti-Blackness, racism, sexism, patriarchy, is reading, studying the people who have done work around this, like reading their memoirs, especially. Yeah. Reading critical text is super important, but I feel like reading the memoirs of activists and organizers, it humanizes them, and it helps you to connect with them on another level, because you get to hear them be vulnerable. It's almost as if you're having like an intimate moment with who they are and how they got to be where they are. Yeah, I would say, reading, thinking critically. I mean, I made a list of lessons that I learned from Assata.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
These are like not all the lessons, but some of them. And one of them is the one I said initially, which is trust in community. You know, the fact that not only did she run away at 15, but she found like these people who took care of her, who stood up for her, who, you know, guided her. And then also after she decided to become pregnant, you know, she trusted in the fact that community would help her, you know, to raise her baby, whether she was here or not. I also wrote the hypocrisy of this country, the hypocrisy of capitalism, as far as the rulers and the bandits and the murderers being in charge, and poverty being criminalized. I wrote that she, you know, there's an aspect of how every revolution is accomplished by actions. There's self-study, you know, there's gathering, but actual action needs to take place. Like, that's why it's like called a movement, is because like people are moving, things are moving. She talks about how activism is sometimes shaped by our oppression. You know, sometimes activism is birthed out of oppression, and birthed out of pushing back, you know, and it makes me think of how, you know, whenever there's a situation of state violence within certain pockets of the country, there's an uprising that can take place, and like activists are literally born from witnessing that. You know, I think about like Ferguson, and I think about the moms of children who have been killed by police, how they're an actual organization that lead these amazing, incredible marches in New York City and have pushed for like laws around education, laws around prison, like, and these women became activists because of what happened to their children, you know. She talks about how to stay safe in prison and never trust the police. You know, when they're trying to get her to talk and say her name, and she's just like never, never, never.
Right.
I feel like that's one of the lessons, is don't ever get railroaded. If you happen to get caught out there, arrested or apprehended, the chances of you getting railroaded are like 99.9%. So use your intuition and know your rights, and don't fall for the okie doke. You know, they might say, oh, if you let us search you and we don't find anything, we'll let you go. Or if you just give me your ID, we just need to scan it to make sure you don't have any warrants. And you're like, oh, I don't have any warrants, here's my ID. No, don't do that. You know, that's one of the lessons I feel like she's teaching in this story, because she never tells them anything. They ask her address. She's like, I don't have one. What's your mama's address? She don't have one. Like, I'm not giving that to you. What's your name? You know, she never tells them shit.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's a really significant lesson. The lack of freedom that exists for Black people, how Black people are surveilled in this country. So even if you're not in prison, you're still not technically free. Right? So we must always be working towards our own liberation, because you think, oh, I'm free, I can do what I want, but still you're followed around the store. You're harassed by police. You know, any situation at any moment, you could wind up hemmed up. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones, rejecting white beauty standards. You know, when the sister Eva, who is in jail with her, she talks about how by Western white beauty standards, this woman might not be considered attractive or beautiful, but she actually was beautiful. And Assata found her so beautiful that she wrote her a poem, you know, Rhinoceros Woman, which is another one of my favorites. So the idea of like not buying into Western beauty standards and seeing the beauty in Black people. You know, broad nose, dark skin, big body. It's freaking gorgeous. You know, don't fall for the okie doke. And how being institutionalized can strip you of your humanity, or try to, you know, and turn you into a number or an object or a slave. You know, the idea that when you are in prison, technically you're considered to be enslaved. Like you're supposed to be working for free.
Right.
When I read this book, I didn't know that. That was something that I learned from her book. And there's a whole bunch more, but I just wanted to share those real quick because I feel like it's
Absolutely.
super important. Page
Absolutely.
174 is the reason. Page 174 of Assata is the reason why I stopped relaxing my hair in 2005. Okay.
That's so funny. I literally just
I love
opened to page 174 as you were speaking.
See,
I
this Black
literally,
August is blessed. This is a Black August blessing. That's what I'm calling it.
literally, because as you were
For the
speaking,
red,
that's
the
what
black,
came
and the
up.
green. Yeah.
She was like, at least, or at last, my hair was free. She's talking about that revolution and how she said, our desire to be free has got to manifest itself in everything we are and we do, in every single
Yes.
aspect of
Yes.
our being.
I love
So,
that part. I love that
yes,
part. And that's another meme that is posted everywhere. I desire to be free has to be manifested in everything we say and do, right? And, you know, the full passage, I think, is so important.
yeah,
And it's another one of those things where I see people posting it, and I'm like, I wonder if they read the full passage and they know what that's from. Because
right,
that's a deep story. You know,
right.
she's like, you know, and I think that no matter how Black women choose to wear their hair, I think that moment, I think most of us have a moment at some point in our adulthood. It's like a rite of passage at some point where we're like either shave our head or cut our head or just do something with our hair that is like a self-defining, self-determining moment. Like, wait a minute, this is mine on my head.
Right,
I'm the one who determines what this is supposed to look like and what feels good for me with this. You know?
right.
So it's just another one of those relatable moments.
It absolutely. I have that whole entire passage highlighted. It's, you know, making sure that that we are constantly making positive statements about ourselves in the way that we dress, in the way that we wear our hair. Absolutely. Well,
I
thank
love a
you so
highlight.
much.
I love a highlight.
Oh, absolutely. This entire book is highlighted. I mean, this is my history book as far as I'm concerned. So,
That's awesome.
but
What made y'all choose to read that book specifically? Was it because it was her birthday?
so we decided at the beginning of, or at the end of June, there are several books that are on the list of 100 books that touch on, that are a little bit more, they're nonfiction. They're kind of rooted in a little bit more of a historical context and giving people some more of that information and those resources that folks were asking for, looking for during that moment where there's like, well, I want to learn about oppression. I want to learn about what institutionalized racism looks like, or, you know, just kind of be more grounded in some sort of text around those lessons. And so we decided, I mean, I think there were a bunch of books on there that we could have chosen from, but this one stood out to me because, kind of as we've been speaking to, so many of these quotes are memeified and they are like in the ether. Everyone has seen them, you know, quotes about education and her chant, like everyone kind of is familiar with them, but there's something different, kind of what we've been saying about reading it and really engaging with the text and trying to understand it from a different level. And I think like the book is fairly relatable and approachable in that it
Yes.
doesn't feel academic, like you mentioned earlier. It doesn't feel like it's a heavy text, but you do
Yes.
get all of that information in the same way. So that was part of the reason why.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes.
You know, it's such a treasure to have books that are so powerful and so iconic, but also accessible, you know, so that you can read it and really understand it, like in your bones and your muscles and your skin. You know, there are some really heavy books that I love, but I think this one is an excellent like primer and foundation. And you can also go back to it again and again and again. So
Absolutely. There's so
excellent
many
choice.
lessons. Yes.
Excellent
Thank
choice.
you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Very much appreciated this conversation. Very much appreciated all of your insight into this book.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super, super honored, and I love to talk about books. So when you emailed me, I was like, Yes.
Yay!
Even though I'm always super nervous to go live because it's like you never know what's going to happen. But
Right.
I'm just like really super grateful. And I really love Zora. Y'all are doing so much good work. Like anything that lifts up and centers the brilliance and creativity of Black women, I'm like in love with it. So thank you for doing that work.
Absolutely. Of course. And thank you for your work. Again, everybody go to the Free Black Women's Library on Instagram and follow the work. Yes.
Yes. And maybe I'll see some of y'all on August 23rd.
Yes.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.